What if you started small and then just worked your way up once you see, okay, this is working for me. Maybe it's just a goal of I'm going to write 2 chapters a week. And that's your goal. And if that works good for you, then the next week you're like, okay, I'm kind of on a roll with this. Let's up it to 3 chapters a week or maybe 4 chapters a week. And then each month you could see what your lifestyle is, able to maintain.
We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show.
What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. We're super stoked to have you here with us today as we dive into this discussion of how you can achieve your biggest writing goals in 2025, this coming year. And no matter when you're watching this, if you're watching this in the future, this is all going to be applicable for any time you want to tackle a big writing project or get something done that you've been anticipating for a long time. Maybe it's a novel or a series or even a short story. No matter what it is, these are all going to be amazing tools for your tool bag as a writer that you can use to take your writing to the next level. And we're specifically going to be talking about how you can write more words than ever in 2025 and write a book fast. So we're not going to just look at forcing yourself to write really quickly, but we're going to look at things that actually help you to want to write more words, and thus you end up writing a book so much faster than you thought possible. I just finished writing a book in about 3 months. Abbie's written her first debut novel, 100 Days of Sunlight, in 1 month. So we're going to draw from our own personal experience, having done this multiple times. And we're going to go over a bunch of different ways that you can make your own, and make your writing dreams come true this coming year. But before we dive into all of that,
we first have to thank our sponsors, who are you guys.
Definitely.
You are the ones who support this podcast, keep it going, keep it free of interruptions. And we so appreciate and value your support. So if you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep it alive and free of interruptions. And when you join the Patreon at any level, you get access to monthly live hangouts with me and Kate, where we hang out with you guys, chat about our current writing projects, share our behind the scenes updates, and just have a really fun chat each month with you guys. So that's really exclusive and very fun. And we hope to see you guys over there. With any tier of the Patreon, you can get access to that. So the link will be below this video if you want to check it out. But let's get into this discussion. This is an exciting one. I always get really excited at the beginning of the year. I feel like I love Christmas time, but honestly, the beginning of a new year is my favorite time of year.
Is it really?
Yeah, because it feels so full of hope and possibilities. And it's just so ambitious and adventurous. You're ready to just embark on a new plan, and anything is possible.
I feel like, too, it's the biggest time of year, other than probably NaNoWriMo, to write a novel.
Yeah.
If you're someone who has always had in the back of your mind that you've always wanted to try writing a book, or maybe writing another book, if you've already written books in the past, maybe there's this burning idea in your mind and you're like, this might be the year that I do that. We want to invite you to make a solid plan to actually do that.
Yeah.
And I think when a lot of people contemplate the idea of writing a book, they think it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be a huge commitment, and it's going to eat up a ton of your schedule. But that really doesn't have to be the case. When you're thinking about writing a book, it could be something that you do in 1 quarter of the year. It could be the first quarter of the year, and you already have this goal accomplished. And I think a lot of people don't think that. They're like, oh, I'm going to start this big giant project in the new year, and it's going to go on maybe for years, and there's no foreseeable end to it. Or maybe you're thinking it will take all year long, and then it becomes a more and more intimidating idea. But you and I have both written books in far less time than that.
Yeah.
And so it can really make the idea so much more manageable. Like I said, whether it's your first book or your 10th book, to think of it as, hey, what if I took this and I made it something more bite-sized, something that I could accomplish even in the first quarter of the year.
Yeah, very true. And that's something that I talked about in one of my recent videos. The first video that I'm posting in January is kind of about how to make a plan to write your dream book, or just accomplish your writing goals, even if it's publishing. Maybe your goal isn't to write something, but to publish something or edit something. And I was touching on that exact same principle, is like breaking it down into action steps. and not overcommitting at the beginning of the year or the first month or whatever, you know, because I think that a lot of times the overcommitment can be overwhelming when you put a lot of responsibility and tasks on your plate and you're like, I have to do this. If I don't keep up with this schedule, then I won't make it to my goal in time. Like, what if you started small and then just worked your way up once you see, okay, this is working for me. Maybe it's just a goal of I'm going to write 2 chapters a week. And that's your goal. And if that works good for you, then the next week you're like, okay, I'm kind of on a roll with this. Let's up it to 3 chapters a week or maybe 4 chapters a week. And then each month you could see what your lifestyle is, you know, able to maintain.
Right.
And what feels good for you.
Yeah, and it's finding, like you're saying, that unique rhythm that works for your lifestyle. So just think about your life and think about what's going to work for you, because there's a lot of writing advice out there that's like, oh no, you have to be writing 5,000 words a day, or you have to spend this many hours a day writing. And you're like, well, that counts me out because I have this and this and this and I can't do that. Well, let's make this unique to you, and only you can be the judge of that. You can take as much advice as you want, but then you're going to have to kind of make a collage of what is going to work for you and find that unique thing. But I think one of the things that can help you write faster is actually wanting to write the book more. And we talk about this all the time. Abbie is notorious for saying this on her channel, is that you write the book that you want to read. So I think one of the probably the number one thing is making your like guilty pleasure idea, make it something you love. Yeah. That to me is like number one. And me and you have talked about this so much.
Yes.
It has to be something that you're addicted to, something you're excited to sit down and write. And I know that was your experience with the last book you just finished.
Yes.
Your last work in progress. So what would you speak to that?
I think that's probably the number one best piece of advice there, because if you're in love with it, you're going to be obsessed with returning to it. Just like if it was a book you were reading and you're like, oh, I can't put this down.
Right.
It's so good. I'm in love with these characters. Or maybe it's a TV show that you love and you're like watching fan edits on YouTube all the time and you're like, I cannot get enough of these characters.
And it's funny
that's
because
how you want to feel.
Right. And it's so easy for us to understand that with what we're consuming.
Yeah.
But yet when it comes to writing, I feel like a lot of writers write the book that they think they should be writing, or they think that they are qualified enough or have enough experience to write, rather than the book they really want to secretly write in some cases.
Yes.
Not in every case, but in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and I think the qualification thing is a big thing, because I think a lot of writers get scared off of writing something because they're like, oh, I haven't personally experienced this, or I don't have like enough knowledge about this. You can research anything, and you can find experts in any area that you can talk to and have relationships with and have a friendship with and, you know, share pages with them. And there are ways to make your writing super authentic, even if you've not intimately experienced what you're writing about. And I would say that's like the worst reason to not write something is just because you haven't personally experienced it. Like, experiencing something emotionally is way more important for your story. Write from emotional experience, and then don't be afraid to embark on any sort of research journey that you need to do in order to learn what you need to learn to write the thing that you're writing. Because the most important thing about it is not the logistics and the details and technicalities. It's the emotion and the heart of the story, the heart of the characters.
So true.
That's really what matters the most in the story.
Because you can't do that later.
Right.
Research, a lot of times you can do later, depending on how it fits in the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, if you're writing historical fiction and your characters get into a carriage and you're like, oh, would it be this type of carriage or that type of carriage?
Yes.
You can figure that out later.
Small details you can figure out later.
If it's like something fundamental, like the whole plot device that holds up the whole story, oh, is that even possible? Then maybe research that ahead of time. But anything that can be done later, you could always do later.
Yeah. And the creative heart and soul of the story is what matters the most. Because, like, you could have an expert in something, like Say like you have a brain surgeon who does not write and they're not a writer and they do not like writing. They could write a story about like doing brain surgery and that might be really technically specific and accurate, but would it have the creative heart and soul that you would put into a story about somebody doing brain surgery? You could research, you could talk to and make friends with a brain surgeon and then figure out what are the technical details I need to include. But the heart and soul of the story is the most important thing. That's what you're bringing with your creative passion for it. So that's something that like, I don't know, that's something I always consider when I get intimidated by research. I'm like, well, the passion that I have for these characters is the most important part.
Yeah.
The rest is detail that you can figure out later.
Right. Which brings us to our second point, which is write what you would want to read so you stay interested. Yes. Which is kind of what we were just talking about. But when you peel back a layer and go deeper, like, okay, make it a guilty pleasure idea. What are you really interested in communicating in the themes of the story? Because there's so many different ways you can take that. Mm-hmm. Beyond just like, is it the type of book you'd want to read? What is in the crux of the story? Is it something you're interested in? What are the themes of the story? What is the internal conflict of the characters? Is it something you relate to? Is it something you're more passionate about? If you can connect with those elements of the story to make it really interesting for you, something you want to explore. And that's another thing I think you can do is make it something that you're really interested in learning more about.
Yeah.
So even if it's something you're not really experienced in, maybe there's something that you're like, oh, I've always been fascinated by this. Like I gravitate to that. I want to learn more about that. Or maybe it's a certain conflict. Like, I really just have a heart for these types of issues. Maybe that's incorporated into the character's internal conflict. You really want to make it at every turn that there's something for you as the author to be interested in, to hold your interest in the story.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Which I feel like you tackled that so much in 100 Days.
Yeah, yes, very much so. And also in the other world in certain ways. Like there's always something about a story that like has to feel new and adventurous to me, but also an element that makes it feel like home. Mm-hmm. And I think that feeling like home is something that will always bring you back to a story. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she described her current work in progress as like, it felt like coming home. And I'm like, that's such a good way to describe it, because that's like how my past few books that I've written have felt like to me. Even though their historical fiction is like a new territory for me, it feels like home because like I love so many period dramas. So it's like, it feels like something about this is very comforting to step into this world in this time period. So I think that element of it, like there's something new and mysterious and adventurous about it. So there's that allure of the unknown, but there's also like the comfort of the familiar. Like you feel at home in this story, and it feels like comforting to step into that world.
Right. Yeah. And that's what keeps drawing you back to write day after day. Because when you think about the commitment of writing a book, it doesn't have to be something that stretches over a large span of time. It could just span a couple of months if you want to consistently write it. And consistent writing really happens because you want to show up for it. Mm-hmm. You're excited to show up for it. If it's something that you're finding hard to write, difficult to write, not interesting enough to write, that's going to equal slower writing and less words, just because you don't have that fire inside you for this particular story. Mm-hmm. So I think, and if you're listening to this right now and thinking, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about my work in progress, but I'm already way into it and I don't want to give it up, you can inject things into the story to make it interesting. It's not like you have to, scrap that story, start from square one. You can literally change anything you want to about your story. It's like painting in that way. Like you can keep going and looking at it from different angles and changing this and changing that and making it your own masterpiece. And that's really what we are encouraging you to do. And Abbie and I have both personally done it in books that we've written. We've made huge changes. Even like after finishing the entire first draft, we've gone back and changed so many major components of things we've written together, things we've written separately. Yeah. There's really no limiters at all. Which kind of brings us to our next point, which is try to write every day and stay in the habit. Mm. And this is something that this is a common piece of advice you hear a lot of writers give is, try to write every day. But Abbie and I take it from a little bit of a different perspective in that don't be so obsessed with how much you write each day. Like, oh, every day I must sit down and write 3,000 words, whatever it is.
Right.
Just show up and write however much you want to. Because there's this rule. I remember hearing a YouTuber talk about it. I think it was Matt Diavella. And he was talking about the 2-day rule. And he was applying it to, I think, the habit of working out. But it's a rule that can be applied to any habit at all. Right. That if you skip a day, it doesn't matter if the next day you do the habit again.
Right. Like you don't want to skip 2 days in a row.
Right, but if you skip 2 days in a row, it starts to like undo the habit. It makes it less familiar, and it's easier to do one more day of not doing it, and then one more day of not doing it, and then another day of not doing it, and then before you know it, a week has gone by, 2 weeks, and now you've fallen out of the habit. But if you can try to show up for yourself and just, hey, I'm going to write a couple paragraphs. And then that can actually be a really beneficial exercise to just help you focus in on, I'm going to write 2 paragraphs to the best of my potential. The best I can make these 2 paragraphs. And maybe you end up writing your favorite line of the entire book. Me and Abbie have lines of our respective books that were like, that was like my favorite part. And I didn't even feel like writing that day. I just showed up and wrote a little bit, and I ended up writing my favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
But what it does is it keeps you in the habit of writing, which is going to translate into you writing the book faster and getting more words on the page each day, just because you're showing up in these small increments when before you might have been like, oh, you know what, I don't have the time, I'm going to just skip it.
Right. Yeah.
Do you find that helps you?
Yeah.
Because I know you have a busy schedule, but you really, you inject writing time wherever you can.
Right. Yeah. And I find that like having that habit of like every morning, even if you skip a day, like you're saying, when I'm not working on something, I skip quite a few days when I'm not in the middle of writing a project. But when I am in the middle of writing something, I try not to skip 2 days in a row. And if I can write every day, every morning for even just a small portion of time, it's like that 1 hour even is better than nothing, because it's keeping the creative muscle working. And I have found over the past year, I've kind of done this experiment with myself over the past year of like writing or committing to creative time every single morning, even if it's not specifically writing. Maybe it's a little bit of editing, or maybe it's some other creative endeavor like music. But exercising that creative muscle first thing in the morning for several hours, if possible, has literally prevented me from getting burnt out.
Wow. Like
I used to get so burnt out when I would put off the creative things, like the things that I didn't immediately have to do, like writing a book, writing a first draft of something, or even editing something. And if I would put that off too long, like, oh, I don't have time to write today, and then the end of the week I'll have time to write. By the time I got to the end of the week, I was so burnt out and like creatively empty that I couldn't get into a writing frame of mind.
That's so
but just writing like a little bit each day, even if it was like, oh, I only have 30 minutes, whatever, open Scrivener and just do something, even if it's just read your previous chapter that you wrote. Just like keep that muscle warm.
Yeah.
And you don't get burnt out. At least that's what I've found from my experience.
Yeah, I love that.
Which has been amazing. It's been like really life-changing, actually.
That's amazing. I love that, because it's really using a different part of your brain.
Right.
Like, I mean, when people talk about like your right side brain versus your left side brain and how those different areas of the brain are used for different tasks.
Yeah.
And when you're creating and working on creative projects, you're actually using parts of your brain that you don't use for other types of practical problem solving situations.
Exactly.
But when you're writing a story or creating music or making a painting or dancing or something purely creative, you're using parts of your brain that you don't use at any other time. And I find that so fascinating. And that makes sense to me, how you were saying that it's like you're using that muscle. It's the same way of like, if you're working out and you're working a certain muscle, that muscle gets stronger and stronger each time you return to it. It's the same with your creativity. As you return to that again and again, you're going to continue to get stronger in that area. Yeah. And that's going to translate to you writing a book faster. Right. Like, what would you say was the thing, like, or maybe like the top things that made you write 100 Days of Sunlight within that month window? Like, what do you think it is that really made you accomplish that?
Well, number one was definitely being fully in love with the idea.
Yeah.
Like fully in love with the characters.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to that so much.
And feeling like this is a really solid idea. Like this is really strong premise, and just being in love with it from day one. The second thing was like just giving myself the space in my schedule to create, and not, and prioritizing that over other things, even if that meant saying no to some things. And at that point in my life, it was not as busy as it is now, but I would hope that like even now I could set aside time if I had to, devote to a writing project like that for that time frame, because there are ways that you can, depending on your schedule, of course, there are ways to shift things around so that you can create that time. Of course, everybody's schedule and everybody's life is different. But for me, it was like prioritizing that project and making time for that just in my life and my creative schedule was definitely, I would say, one of the top three things that made me write it that quickly.
That makes so much sense.
Being in love with it and then having the time for it, because if you're constantly thinking about like, oh, I have these other things I need to do, you're not fully there in the story. Yes. And some days I didn't write that much, and then other days I would stay up till like 2:00 in the morning. It was kind of unhealthy, honestly. But it was like,
but you can sustain it for a short period of time, though.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, and when you like the book I just wrote, my work in progress that I just finished like a week ago or so, something like that, and I finished it in a little over 3 months, and I put a lot of anything I could put off, I put off. Anything that had to have my immediate attention, I still tended to those things. So if you can kind of mitigate that, like what are the things that truly need your attention? Like feeding your dog, feeding your child, going to work, things that can't be put off. Like, okay, let's not put those things off. But maybe being on social media, or maybe doing any other thing that like isn't an immediate fire that needs to be put out. Can we like put all of that on hold for just a small amount of time, for 1 month, for 2 months, and really lean into the process of writing your book in every spare moment you have that you don't need to be doing something.
Right.
And all those moments really add up to, like, if you compress that, that's like probably an hour or more a day. And if you can dedicate, like, okay, I write for a straight hour, you're probably getting a couple thousand words in possibly. And then that translates into like 2 months later, you're almost done with your book. So that was something that I used when I was writing my current work in progress, or the one I just finished. I keep thinking of it as I'm still writing it because I'm still editing it. But it's like, if you can put some stuff on hold, even if it feels like you're procrastinating on other things, if it's just for a short amount of time, it can be sustainable because hey, in 2 months, I'm going to go back to everything else and I will have a finished book, finished product.
Right. Yeah, very true.
And me and Abbie are going to be talking about all of this stuff and more at our upcoming Muse Challenge. Some of you guys are familiar with Muse Challenge, which is something I launched in December, which is an initiative for writers looking to take their writing to the next level through monthly challenges that come in the form of a summit. We meet up live for a virtual retreat. We get together, we talk about a different topic, writing related. We delve into all the aspects of that. In December, it was all about writing dynamic dialogue, and so many of you showed up for the summit. It was amazing. We just spent an hour doing a deep dive into how to write dialogue to the very best of your ability. And it came with this amazing 45-page booklet for you to take home, to take away from the summit, with all the notes that we went over and some writing exercises, prompts, and ideas to get you started. This month, Abbie's joining me for Muse Challenge, and it's going to be an amazing kickstart to your new year because it's all about how to write a book fast. So we're going to be talking about how to plan for ultimate success without getting overwhelmed, which is something Abbie is really good at. And I'm so excited for her to talk about what she does with her own works in progress because she's so organized She's a bit more of a planner. I'm a bit more of a pantser, and we both have different ways of tackling it. But I think Abbie has so much to bring to the table here. I can't wait for you guys to hear this part. Carving out writing time, even with the most hectic schedules. So if you're like, I don't even know if I'll be able to tackle my book this year, we're going to help you figure out how to do that. Write faster than you thought possible, maybe even finish your novel in 3 months or less, and make the process fun and meaningful while crushing self-doubt and writer's block. So we're going to tackle all this stuff. You're going to get an amazing booklet with all the notes. It's a little ebook that comes with every single summit. Not only that, but you get access to the exclusive Facebook group and the Patreon community. So all of that's going to be available to you, as well as the previous training from December that I just talked about. But Abbie and I are going to be meeting up with you live on January 4th.
Yes, January 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they'll be able to watch the replay if they can't make it to the live stream. So if you can't make it to the live stream at the time, then you can always watch the replay and get access to all the exclusive benefits that Kate just mentioned. The booklets and the resources and the private Facebook group as well.
Yeah, so it's literally going to be like a live writing retreat to kick off your new year.
Yes.
And Abs and I are going to be there live with you guys, chatting with you, answering your questions, and going over a ton of material to help you just really hone in on what are your writing goals for this year, how to kick it off right, and how to write a book faster than you thought possible, to really lean into the process and see those goals not only start, but accomplish them, finish the project in this new year, because it's totally possible. It's completely achievable. We've both done it, and we're going to just try to dispense as much of our own experience and tools that we've learned really work to give them to you so you can use them in your own toolkit, in your own writing. Yes. We've never done anything like this before, so I'm really excited.
Yeah,
it's going to be like,
it's going to be fun.
We've never really done a New Year's summit together, so this is going to be really fun. I'm really excited for it. I think you guys are going to get a ton of value out of it. All you have to do to sign up is to click the link to my Patreon below and sign up at the Muse Challenge Summit level, which will give you instant access to the Patreon community, the Facebook community, and the previous training in December and the booklet for that. So you're going to get a ton of resources right away that I would definitely recommend diving into, because it was a really comprehensive study. It's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, definitely sign up for that. It's going to be amazing. We're really excited to see you there to help you kick off your new year and start accomplishing your writing goals. It's absolutely possible. You've totally got this, and we're here to cheer you on and offer you whatever support you need to really hone in on your goals this year.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Very excited. So make sure you click the link below and sign up, save your spot, and we hope to see you guys there. And while you're down there below this video, comment and let us know, what is your big writing goal for this year? Do you have a book in mind that you're hoping to write, or maybe a project that you're working on editing or revising, or maybe something that you want to publish, or maybe you're working on something completely different? We would love to hear about your current projects in the comments below. So make sure you leave us a comment and leave us a nice rating if you're listening on an audio podcast platform. We always appreciate those. Thank you again to our amazing patrons who help make this show possible. And we hope this is going to be such an amazing year for you and for the entire community. We have lots of fun content planned for the podcast and for future events and courses and trainings. So we're so glad and grateful that you're here. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you don't miss any future podcasts. We post the podcast on Kate's channel and my channel. So my channel is linked below as well. It's youtube.com/Abbie Emmons. So make sure you're subscribed both places so that you don't miss an episode. And we will see you guys in the coming episodes of the podcast and at the Muse Challenge on Saturday, January 4th. Until then,
stay stoked
and rock on.